It appears that the mother and daughter came here for a dance competition or a cheer competition. Sometime last night, the mother shot her daughter and then shot herself. This is a sad and tragic incident, and our hearts go out to the family.
A heartbreaking end to a search for a missing mother and daughter. Less than 24 hours after they were last seen, their bodies were discovered in an off-strip hotel.
February 15th, 2026. A hotel room in Las Vegas stays quiet all morning. Outside, hundreds of cheerleaders gather for day 2 of competition. Music echoes through convention halls. Teams warm up. Parents film routines. But 2 names never answer roll call. An 11-year-old girl, her mother. Less than 24 hours earlier, they had competed, smiling, posting photos, acting like nothing was wrong. By 2:30 p.m., hotel security uses a master key to enter their room at the Rio Hotel Casino. Inside, they find 38-year-old Tawnia McGeehan and her daughter, 11-year-old Addi Smith, both dead from gunshot wounds. 1 weapon, 2 victims. Police quickly confirm what the scene suggests, a murder-suicide. But that answer only raises a darker question. How does a weekend cheer competition end in a hotel room homicide? Because this wasn't a random act of violence. There was no break-in, no struggle heard through the walls, no stranger on security cameras. The threat came from inside the room. And if you rewind this story just 24 hours, everything looked normal. Addi had just competed with her team. She lived in West Jordan, trained hard, traveled for events, and was building a future in competitive cheer. Her coaches described her as focused, dedicated, bright. Her mother appeared involved, driving her to practices, attending competitions, posting about her achievements online. From the outside, this was a devoted parent supporting her child's passion. But there was another story unfolding behind closed doors. A 9-year custody battle, court orders, conflict so severe that exchanges had to be structured like crime scenes. And somewhere between Saturday night and Sunday morning, something shifted. No loud argument, no public meltdown, just silence. The kind of silence that only gets noticed when it's too late. This is the case of a custody war that spanned nearly a decade and ended in a Las Vegas hotel room. And before we go deeper, understand this. Addi Smith didn't just lose her life that night. She lost a future that had nothing to do with courtrooms. Let's go back to the beginning. How long can a custody battle go on before it stops being about a child and starts being about control? Long before that hotel room in Las Vegas, there was a courtroom in Utah. For nearly 9 years, Tawnia McGeehan and Addi's father were locked in a legal fight over custody. Filings described repeated disputes over visitation, decision-making, and compliance with agreements. This wasn't a short-term disagreement after a divorce. It was ongoing, exhausting, expensive. And in cases like this, the damage rarely stays inside the courtroom. Judges had to step in multiple times. There were structured exchanges, legal motions, accusations from both sides, the kind of prolonged conflict that reshapes families over time. Here's what makes this darker. From the outside, Addi's life appeared stable. She trained consistently. She competed. She traveled. She smiled for photos. On social media, there were snapshots of routines, medals, team events, normal milestones of a young athlete growing up in competitive cheer. But legal documents tell a parallel story. Disputes over travel permissions, arguments over schedules, allegations of interference. When parents are at war, the child often becomes the battleground. And sometimes the most dangerous escalation doesn't look violent at all. It looks procedural, signed, stamped, filed. In the months leading up to February 2026, tensions reportedly intensified. Court decisions did not always go the way one side wanted. Orders required compliance. Emotions ran high. There is no verified evidence of threats, no confirmed warning that violence was imminent, which makes what happened next harder to process. Because when tragedies like this occur, people look backwards searching for a sign, a social media post, a heated exchange, a final message that hinted at what was coming. In this case, there wasn't one. No public breakdown, no dramatic goodbye. Just a trip to Las Vegas for a cheer competition. A mother and daughter checking into the Rio Hotel and Casino like thousands of other families that weekend. If this was the end of a 9-year legal battle, no one in that lobby knew it. And that's what unsettles people most. Because the custody war didn't explode in a courtroom, it ended in a hotel room, far from home, far from the judge who had overseen nearly a decade of disputes. The question is, why there? Why that weekend? And what happened inside that room between Saturday night and Sunday morning? Because whatever shifted, it happened quietly. And quiet decisions can be the most permanent. What if the most dangerous moment in a tragedy is the one that looks completely normal? On Saturday, February 14, 2026, Addi competed. Inside the convention space at the Rio Hotel and Casino, music blasted, teams rotated through routines, and parents recorded every flip and landing. By all accounts, 11-year-old Addi Smith performed successfully. There were no reports of distress, no public arguments, no visible signs of crisis. After the competition, she and her mother returned to their room. That detail matters, because tragedy didn't interrupt the event. It waited until the doors closed. Security footage later confirmed there were no forced entries, no unknown visitors approaching the room, no disturbances reported by neighboring guests. Hotel staff described the floor as quiet. So what changed between Saturday night and Sunday morning? There were no emergency calls placed from the room, no reports of screaming, no alerts triggered, just silence. When teammates gathered for day 2 of the competition on Sunday morning, Addi didn't show up. At first, it wasn't panic, just confusion. Maybe she overslept, maybe traffic, maybe a scheduling mix-up. But as hours passed, that confusion shifted into concern. By the afternoon, coaches contacted hotel staff. At approximately 2:30 p.m., security entered the room. Inside, they found 38-year-old Tawnia McGeehan and her daughter dead from gunshot wounds. A firearm was recovered at the scene. Police later stated the evidence indicated a murder-suicide. No intruder, no struggle extending beyond that room. Just 2 lives ended behind a locked door. Here's the part that lingers. There was no dramatic buildup visible to outsiders, no public unraveling in the hotel lobby, no social media post signaling goodbye. The final photos from that weekend show a child competing, focused, athletic, alive. It's easier to process violence when it announces itself. This didn't. It blended in. And when something blends in, it forces an uncomfortable thought. How many other hotel rooms across the country look ordinary right now? Because the hardest truth in cases like this isn't just that it happened, it's that no one saw it coming, at least not in time to stop it. And that raises the question investigators had to answer next. Was there any warning at all, hidden somewhere beneath the surface? How do you investigate a crime when the suspect is already dead? Within hours of the discovery at the Rio Hotel and Casino, authorities from Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department began processing the scene. Evidence collection, ballistics, timeline reconstruction. By that evening, officials made a preliminary statement. The deaths of Tawnia McGeehan and 11-year-old Addi Smith appeared to be a murder-suicide. That conclusion was based on physical evidence inside the room, including the location of the firearm and the lack of forced entry. But when a case moves quickly toward a clear answer, it doesn't stop the questions, it shifts them. Investigators confirmed there were no signs of a struggle outside the immediate area. No surveillance footage showing a third party entering, no reported disturbance from neighboring rooms. The timeline suggested the incident occurred sometime between late Saturday night and early Sunday morning. And that was it. No public evidence of a manifesto, no recorded warning, no final message released. In many high-profile cases, investigators spend weeks piecing together suspects, motives, unknown movements. Here, the suspect and victim were in the same room. The narrative seemed straightforward. Too straightforward. Because when the why isn't immediately visible, people start searching for it themselves. Some pointed back to the 9-year custody battle in Utah. Others speculated about mental health struggles. But speculation is not evidence, and law enforcement was careful not to release unverified assumptions. Here's what was confirmed. The firearm was legally possessed. There was no indication of outside involvement. The case did not suggest a broader threat to the public. Which means this tragedy was contained inside one room, contained inside one family. And in a way, that containment makes it more disturbing, because there's no external villain to chase, no stranger to blame, no larger conspiracy to unravel. Just a private decision that turned fatal. And when investigators close a case quickly, it doesn't erase the emotional aftermath. It simply leaves the unanswered why suspended in the air. A child with a future in competitive cheer, a mother locked in years of legal conflict, a weekend that should have ended with trophies. Instead, it ended with silence. And for many, that silence is the most unsettling part. Because without a clear motive released publicly, we're left with something far more uncomfortable. The possibility that some tragedies don't announce themselves. They build quietly, and then they happen. Can a tragedy build for years without leaving a single clear warning? After investigators confirmed the deaths of Tawnia McGeehan and 11-year-old Addi Smith as a murder-suicide, attention shifted back to Utah, to courtrooms, custody filings, and nearly a decade of legal conflict. For 9 years, the custody battle had shaped Addi's life. Court documents referenced repeated disputes between her parents. Motions were filed, orders were challenged, decisions were appealed. The conflict wasn't hidden, it was documented. But documented conflict isn't the same as documented danger. There were no public restraining orders tied directly to threats of lethal violence, no recorded emergency calls in the days immediately before the trip to Las Vegas that signaled something imminent. And that's what makes this harder to process. Because when a case has a clear escalation, police reports, threats, prior attempts, It creates a chain of cause and effect, a path investigators can follow. Here, the path looks procedural, legal, civil, until it wasn't. Friends and community members described Addi as focused and energetic. Competitive cheer wasn't just a hobby, it was part of her identity. Travel, practices, team bonds. Her world extended beyond the conflict in court. But here's the uncomfortable reality in high-conflict custody cases. Tension can exist without exploding publicly. Arguments don't always happen online. Breakdowns don't always happen in front of witnesses. Decisions aren't always shared. Whatever led to that hotel room was not broadcast. There was no public post signaling despair, no visible collapse in the hours before the incident. Saturday's competition unfolded normally. That's the contradiction. A child performing under bright lights, a mother sitting in the audience, a future still appearing intact, and yet by Sunday afternoon, both were gone. So people ask the question that always follows tragedies like this. Was there a moment when this could have been stopped? The honest answer, based on publicly released information, is unclear. Investigators did not report prior criminal charges connected to violent behavior in this case. They did not announce outside involvement. They did not release evidence of a final confrontation inside the room, which leaves something far more difficult than a dramatic motive. It leaves silence. And silence forces a realization many don't want to face. Not every dangerous decision is preceded by obvious warning signs. Some unfold behind closed doors, where documentation ends and private thoughts begin. And when those thoughts turn irreversible, there is no one left to explain them. What do you do with a tragedy that has no villain left to face? When the investigation by the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department concluded this was a murder-suicide, the legal case effectively ended. There would be no trial, no cross-examination, no courtroom revelations explaining motive. Just paperwork, autopsy reports, a closed file. But for the people who loved Addi Smith, closure didn't arrive with that conclusion. It couldn't. Because while the official answer explained how, it never fully explained why. Back in West Jordan, the aftermath unfolded quietly. Teammates returned home without one of their own. Coaches had to explain something to children that adults themselves struggled to process. A school desk sat empty. And then there's the father. For 9 years, the conflict lived inside court filings and structured exchanges. Now it had ended in the most irreversible way possible. A custody battle that once revolved around time-sharing schedules and legal motions ended with permanent absence. No more hearings, no more negotiations, no more appeals. Just silence. When tragedies like this happen, communities instinctively search for lessons, warning signs, policy failures, overlooked red flags. But sometimes the hardest truth is that not every case leaves a trail clear enough to follow backward. There were documented legal disputes, yes. There was prolonged conflict, yes. But there was no public declaration of what would happen in that hotel room at the Rio Hotel and Casino. And that's what lingers. Because this wasn't violence that erupted in public. It didn't escalate in a parking lot or during a custody exchange. It unfolded behind a locked door between midnight and morning without witnesses. One moment, a child was preparing for day 2 of competition. The next, a team was waiting for someone who would never walk through the doors again. If there's something this case leaves behind, it isn't a mystery of identity. It's a reminder of how private conflicts can carry unseen weight, and how quickly an ordinary weekend can turn irreversible. A hotel room that checked in on Saturday, a master key turning on Sunday, a silence that will last far longer than the trip ever did. And maybe that's the most unsettling part. Sometimes the danger isn't loud. It's quiet enough to blend in until it's too late.